All right, let's get into it. Our top story tonight, let's talk about what's going on in the Ukrainian war. The United States and UK are now pushing for more offensive weapons to Ukraine rather than just those defensive weapons, which is great. Because we need more offensive stuff from the United States and from NATO partners. We really were getting upset that you guys were not sending enough billions of dollars in weapons into Ukraine. So, yes.
Is it also because they have shown that they're responsible with weaponry and keep it inside their playroom?
No, they get it. They scatter it all over the place. Like when they start playing with their weapons, they do not keep it in the playroom.
Okay.
It continues to go to other locations.
Oh.
So we'll have more on that in a minute. We're going to hear from General Mark Milley, but something is changing. The Western media is starting to change their tune over Ukraine. You might have noticed this over the past couple of weeks. Maybe it was, I don't know, pre or post-election. Maybe post midterms. I don't know. Something kind of switched in the mainstream media. Overnight, the Associated Press has fired the reporter who told us who told the world that Russia had fired a missile into Poland. This was the original Associated Press report, and it would have sparked World War III. So let me read this. And we now know, of course, that Ukraine fired that missile that killed 2 people. So here is the Associated Press story. 3 officials told the AP that preliminary assessments indicate the missile that struck Poland had been fired by Ukrainian forces at an incoming Russian missile. Okay. So that was the original. And that,
yes, I remember it, which caused WW3 to trend online and everyone to surmise that meant that Russia was attacking inside of NATO borders and that NATO would respond in kind and that hell would rain down on us all. It turned out to not be the case at all. And even the Biden administration quickly came out and said, we don't think that that's the case. So why did the Associated Press use that as a push alert to all of their phones, all over Twitter? Why did that happen? Who was the U.S. official?
And then Vladimir Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, of course, then took that as an opportunity to go to, post on social media that he thought that this was a provocation and we need to retaliate. Watch.
What we warned about a long time ago happened today. We've been saying this. Terror is not limited to our national borders. It's already spread to the territory of Moldova. And today, Russian missiles hit Poland, the territory of a friendly country. To fire missiles at NATO territory, this is a Russian missile attack on collective security. This is a very significant escalation. We must act.
So what's amazing about that, of course, he knew, and the United States had warned him that wasn't true.
Yes.
So you see as an opportunity to continue to go forth with that, right? So then the retraction. So then the Associated Press came out with a retraction of sorts. The new assessment contradicts information earlier Tuesday from a senior U.S. intelligence official who told the AP that Russian missiles crossed into Poland. Oh, so they just made a little correction. No, nothing to see here, no war. And I think they were surprised. I think the Associated Press, which of course has been a mouthpiece of the intelligence state, has been since this entire beginning of this entire war, has been pushing out propaganda. And I think maybe they were surprised at the pushback that they were getting actually from people inside the Biden administration.
You think? I mean, I saw that most of the pressure was either from sort of the right or online, people who were like, this is extremely irresponsible. I don't know. They've been able to get away with so many half-truths and so many refracted truths that I feel like they're surprised just that anyone was paying attention.
Yeah, maybe they're just like, oh, we've been getting away with this for now since February with all sorts of stories. Hey, we're the Associated Press. We're reporting on things here in Ukraine, and we don't even have reporters in the towns where we're writing the stories from. Like that's been verified.
But there's so much that's not passing the smell test here because they doubled down on this. It was a senior U.S. official, but giving us no names on, of course they're not going to give us names, but any kind of how did this get wrong? How did we get this wrong?
Well, the Associated Press has standards. I don't know if you know this, and we'll get into some of these sources here in a second because that's an interesting part of this. So the Associated Press has, they have their own rule book. You can take a look here on your screen. This is the Associated Press Statement of News, Values, and Principles For more than 170 years, the people of the Associated Press have had the privilege of bringing news and information to the world. We have gone to great lengths, overcome great obstacles, and too often have made great sacrifices to ensure that the news was reported quickly, accurately, and honestly. So that's the preamble. And then if you take a closer look down on their standards page, we abhor inaccuracies, carelessness, bias, or distortions. Oh, really? You abhor it?
Well, at least they're not using the Oxford comma, because that is against AP style. So it's consistent.
We always strive to identify all the sources of our information, the second paragraph. We shield them from anonymity only when they insist upon it for a valid reason and when they provide vital information, not opinion or speculation. There is no other way to obtain that information, and when we are confident the source is reliable and in a position to know we don't plagiarize and we respect copyright.
Okay, that gives me an idea for a content analysis then, because I do feel like during this specific conflict, many Western outlets are taking the liberty with unnamed sources. And I think it's more than in most conflicts. I feel like that, and I would like to do a content analysis to see if I'm right or not. So any J School students out there right now, or sociologists who want to do analysis of this war coverage, there's a good project. Are they using more anonymous sources in this war than ever before? I feel like that's true.
I think absolutely that's the case. And here's what they say about anonymous sources, according to the Associated Press, in their guidelines. Reporters who intend to use material from anonymous sources must get approval from their news manager before sending the story to the desk. The manager is responsible for vetting the material, making sure it meets AP guidelines. The manager must know the identity of the source and is obligated, like the reporter, to keep the source's identity confidential. Only after they are assured that the source material has been vetted by a manager should editors and producers allow it to be used. So, these sources have to be verified by the manager at the Associated Press? Be curious to find out then if that's the case. 3 high-ranking U.S. military officials anonymously confirmed this story.
And were then, according to this protocol, approved by management to publish and push all over Twitter?
Well, does that include the line, some people say? You know what I mean? When they use that line, some people have said, or this has said, like, those wouldn't be anonymous sources, but they use that language sometimes too.
Yes. Or experts say, but no, this is different. People on the ground
have said, or
we're talking about an information that is attributed to somebody or a quote.
Right. I mean, it's crazy though. So, well, then, will this manager get fired? And maybe perhaps we can actually, get verification from this manager as to who these sources were. I think it's a total fabrication. I think it's garbage. If anything, this shows that one hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing inside Washington. And as the Associated Press, of course, is a mouthpiece for the intelligence state. The intelligence state floats stories to them. And then, of course, they put them right inside the Associated Press. So now that AP reporter is falling on the sword for the intelligence state. So we learned from the AP that they have now fired that reporter who claimed the missile hit Poland. So that reporter has been fired. Really? But what about the manager who approved these anonymous sources and who nearly got us into World War III? I mean, literally, think about the end of the war. This is like the news story that could have led to massive nuclear annihilation.
Yeah. But it would have been more like a Three's Company episode because it was all a misunderstanding.
Right. Like, whoops, Mr. Furley, he was the one that rang the doorbell. But
they dismissed the reporter, but like, what about Zelensky? Like, what about all the propaganda coming from Ukraine? Like, you know what I mean? Like those, they heard it coming from straight from him too. So
right. Well, was
he getting fired?
And was he just going off of this? Was he just like literally going off of the reports from? So here is the.
I mean, that's unacceptable because he's the leader of a military as the president of a country. So, he needs to at least show some competence to show us that he's in charge in his own military.
So here he is. This is James Laporta. He's the national security reporter who was quoting an unnamed senior U.S. intelligence official. I would love to hear from him. James, now that you're fired, maybe you can speak freely. Would you like to come on Redacted and tell us the story?
Tell us who that redacted source is.
I would love to know that redacted source because you got thrown under the bus for it. Because I don't believe for a second, I mean, I think the people that work at these news organizations largely are just being fed stories. Here's a source. You need to run with this. You need to publish a story on this. I don't think that he has. I mean, certainly not the. You don't work for these news organizations and have autonomy. You go to work at a place like you go to work at a place like the Gray Zone or Redacted, where no one's telling you what to say. Yeah. You can say what you report. You can find what from your reporting, and you can report it. So hey, we'd love to talk with you, James. I think it would be great. I'd love to have him on the show.
Well, and I think it's also like, think about like how fast that news happened, like how fast we got that information. Like there was people just on the ground immediately. It's almost like I don't know if you remember the story during 9/11 where it's like they found the passports like instantly in all the rubble. You know what I mean? It's like that kind of thing. It's like, how do you get that information that quickly?
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. So again, waiting on that to find out if he'll talk to us. Meanwhile, we're learning a lot more now about the gruesome war crimes that have been detailed by the New York Times. So we have this reversal by the Associated Press, and now we had this big bombshell report from the New York Times. I couldn't believe it when I saw it. This was a remarkable moment. Something is changing, I think, in the Western media. The New York Times over the weekend releasing the massive report showing the brutal murders of Russian prisoners of war. Now, we're not going to show you any of the video, but this is just a still image from the New York Times piece, which you can read fully on their website. And so in this photo, there's no one dead yet, sadly. They were told to lie face down, and they were shot. We won't show you the video. You can seek it out if you want to, but it's awful, and it is a war crime by all accounts. And the New York Times confirmed the video is real. Let me repeat. The New York Times authenticated the video. Imagine that happening back in February or March of this year, where the New York Times would have authenticated that Russian POWs were shot in a war crime. It's a pretty big moment, and it explains a lot.
Yeah.
Firstly,
this is what they're saying Russia has been doing. Like this, if you watch the propaganda that comes out of the Ukraine, this is what they are accusing Russia of doing the entire time, and we've not seen any evidence of Russia doing anything even close to this, other than trying to avoid casualties at all costs.
Yeah, but that doesn't stop them, and the Associated Press has been complicit in this as well. So this is why this is like a sea change moment, maybe? Maybe I'm just being hopeful here.
Well, I was thinking about it because in the same week that CBS News releases this Hunter Biden laptop confirmation,
right,
and the whole internet is like, way to catch up. You are about 2 years late on that.
Right.
In the same week that CNN has record low ratings. In the same week that, CBS News goes off Twitter and then comes back. I think that there's this, now the media is like, why do they hate us? One, because you don't tell us the truth.
Right.
You hold stories that you feel like are unfavorable to your pre-existing narrative. And maybe it's time to stop that. And it feels like for the first time, the New York Times was like, we don't like reporting this, but we're going to have to.
Yeah. Like, all right, I guess we have to do our jobs.
Yeah.
That's why
you're not supposed to like the things that you report on as a reporter, unless you review spa treatments or whatever. But for the most part, you should not have. I was thinking about this today because I'm like, most of this stuff I would never have allowed myself to entertain if we had not been doing so much research for the show. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I don't have a pre-existing bias other than peace. But you have to look these things in the eye in order to advocate for them to stop. You have to know what's going on.
Well, and they wouldn't know what's going on because they've been kept from knowing what's going on. That's part of the problem. Firstly, it explains why Ukraine hasn't wanted Western media near the front and the front battle lines. Remember when we showed you the video of CNN, the CNN anchor reporter in the field in Ukraine admitting that the Ukrainian government has been keeping them from the front lines to avoid they're basically like, they keep us far away from there. Why? So you're only allowed to report from Kiev in a hotel and act like you're actually in the front lines and you're not? So that's garbage. What happened to actual war correspondence? We're not allowed to see it because you don't want us to see what's actually happening. We don't want to see what's being caught on camera. So that's when CNN actually tried to share that with us. What are they trying to hide? So now I'm going to quote from the New York Times. I almost grabbed your glasses. I wonder how that would have worked.
Don't stretch them.
So let me quote from the New York Times piece now. So this is the New York Times. These are not my words. This is the New York Times. A series of videos that surfaced on social media last week has ignited a debate over whether Ukrainian forces committed war crimes or acted in self-defense as they tried to capture a group of Russian soldiers who were then killed. The video shows the grisly before and after scenes of the encounter earlier this month, in which at least 11 Russians, most of whom are seen lying on the ground, appear to have been shot at close range, one after the other of their fellow fighters suddenly opened fire on Ukrainian soldiers standing nearby. The videos detailed below, and whose authenticity has been verified by the New York Times, offer a rare look into one gruesome moment among many in the war, but do not show how or why the Russian soldiers were killed. Ultimately, they leave a mystery that has been used by both sides on the online battle for hearts and minds. The videos were first circulated by Ukrainian news and social media channels. They were using them to laud their military prowess of their armed forces and publicize their heroic taking of territory lost to Russia early in the war. Now, very important, as Wyatt Reed pointed out, journalist Wyatt Reed, who we had here on the show, he said the only army right now that's been actively filming these types of things has been the Ukrainian army.
Yes.
And they wind up on Ukrainian Telegram channels. So here you have this video of this, and it's astonishing and terrible. You know, it's awful. We're learning more, though, about these war criminals involved in these in this act. The Ukrainian border guards.
What really gets me, sorry. I was going to say what really gets me is that they try to spin it as like when they say self-defense, like these people had their hands tied behind their back. Like there's no argument you could make for that whatsoever if you look at the video.
Well, I didn't see in this video, to be clear, I just want to be 100% clear. From what I can see, I don't see any hands tied behind backs. I see them they're being told to lay down on their knees and their hands above their heads. So you might be seeing a different video. And maybe they are in a different video that you've seen. But from what I can tell from the videos I've seen from the New York Times, in these videos, their hands were not held behind their back. In other videos, you're right, that we showed on the show. And then, of course, we were blocked for showing them. We were demonetized for showing them. There were hands tied behind the back. So just to be clear on that point. But yes.
Yeah.
So we are learning more about these war criminals who were involved in this horrific act. The Ukrainian border guards who shot the prisoners were identified as Artur Bordnichuk and Mykhalyevsky Nazar. Those are the Ukrainians. But who else was there that day? Well, we learned this morning that an American soldier was involved during this execution time. An American soldier was there on the Ukrainian side. According to the Telegram channel Track a Mercenary, U.S. infantry veteran Chris Naganuma from Arvada, Colorado, am I saying that right? Arvada, Colorado, was present in the videos. He was there and confirmed. Now, this has been confirmed by the Gateway Pundit. This has been confirmed by Track a Mercenary, which tracks mercenaries. Can you believe that? Like, we have literally, because we need to find out who all these people that are going into Ukraine and actually getting paid to fight in Ukraine. And who's footing the bill for this, by the way? I saw a super chat just come in a minute ago. Let me ask that. It's like, how are we in the West? Denise says, how are we as Americans supposed to assist funding a war abroad while we're being invaded by criminals with fentanyl in the United States coming across our borders?
Yeah, that's ordained by the FDA. I mean, they don't want to fight it.
Yeah. Your tax dollars going to mercenaries in Ukraine. We already know, we've already shown you how your tax dollars are also going to fund Al-Qaeda and ISIS fighters who are coming into Ukraine. That's been confirmed.
Well, and you
contractors.
Remember, we showed videos before where it was Americans clearly walking through there saying we're here to kill some Russians. Like they were saying that. Mm-hmm. And that clearly showed that that's what they just did.
But that was applauded on social media early on. I don't think that at least Twitter has the same, social media has the same appetite for people saying that kind of thing now. But that doesn't mean they're not there doing it.
So this is Chris Naganuma, who is there. Here he is, wearing his, night scope stuff. And then here he is with the Ukrainian, he's there laughing with them. Here, I don't know if you have this other one there. There he is laughing with them in the field there. 8 days ago, Chris Naganuma from Arvada, Colorado, according to Track-A-Merc Online. U.S. arrived in Ukraine. He came to visit U.S. mercenary team called FOG, Task Force 31, and is now there as a combat journalist. Naganuma is an ex-U.S. infantry and is currently taking pictures and training with the U.S. mercenary team.
Okay.
Really, he's a journalist. So then clearly, I have some questions. I bet he's got a lot of videos of this then. If he was there taking photos and he was involved in this, and he was categorizing, or he was cataloging all of this.
For posterity.
Yeah. So your Ukrainian buddies that you were hanging out with that were doing this, if you're a journalist, then share the videos. Like, we'd love to see this and see the information, see what actually happened and unfolded. Now, no one's claiming that he had anything to do with the horrific war crime here, but he was there, right, according to these reports. So if he is, we'd love to see the videos. Here he is.
Well, and we've had, I was going to say really quick, people have been busted with these mercenaries and stuff have these private groups, these like their own little social media groups where they share pictures of people they've hurt and all this other stuff. And some of that stuff ends up leaking. And I wonder how much of that is what we're actually getting. It's like they're trying to share it with their buddies, but somebody's sharing it outside of that. Yeah,
it's hard to say. I mean, who knows, right? Again, this is the fog of war. Where did these videos actually come from? Who posted these to a Telegram channel? I've seen hundreds of these types of videos, similar types of videos like this posted on Ukrainian Telegram channels. So this is not surprising at all that this stuff leaks out.
Well, the New York Times is saying that it was circulated on Ukrainian news. So that gives it further validation if Ukraine feels like they had nothing to hide by showing them.
Yeah.
That it was so totally fine that they could put it on their nightly news.
I wonder now if the New York Times will do a follow-up and dive deeper into this angle that has been found by Track-A-Merc Online and also by Gateway Pundit about this American journalist who was there. Like, I'd love for the New York Times to do a follow-up on this story. They're the ones that broke the story.
Do journalism for once.
They broke the story. Yeah, maybe they should follow up on it. Here is his Facebook page that they found as well. This was on Gateway Pundit as well. So now the United Nations is asking Ukraine to investigate, but Russia asked the United Nations to do its own investigation for obvious reasons. They're also asking the Council of Europe, the International Committee of the Red Cross, and Amnesty International, which has already independently verified that the Ukrainian army is guilty of violating international war treaties. They published a report on that, then had to kind of retract it or walk it back and backpedal it. So will anything come of this one? It's a good question. Under the Prisoners of War, Article 13 in United Nations Human Rights, prisoners of war must at all times be humanely treated, according to the United Nations. Any unlawful act or omission by detaining power causing death or seriously endangering the health of a prisoner of war in its custody is prohibited and will be regarded as a serious breach of the present convention. In particular, no prisoner of war may be subjected to physical mutilation or to medical or scientific experiments of any kind which are not justified by the medical, dental, or hospital treatments of the prisoner concerned and carried out in his interest. Otherwise, it's a war crime. Oh, so you mean like laying them down and shooting them? That's not part of taking care of them. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak then visited Ukraine over the weekend, left the G20, and pledged another $50 million in additional aid. Oh, pounds. Yeah, I keep forgetting. Pounds, baby, pounds. This happened, and even though the UK National Crime Agency's Director General Graham Bigger told the Sunday Times that weapons sent to Ukraine could be trafficked out of Ukraine and ended up in the hands of criminals and terrorists. And someone in our chat earlier said, yes, 75% of these weapons, we can't track them. We don't know. So General Mark Milley, though, is not moved by that. He doesn't care where these weapons go. We're about to send a whole lot more offensive weapons. Watch.
The United States are determined to continue to support Ukraine with the means to defend themselves for as long as it takes. We will continue to support Ukraine for as long as it takes, and we will continue to support them as long as it takes. And until then, we will continue to support all the way for as long as it takes. We will be there for as long as it takes.
We'll be there forever.
Wait, we will be there? Thought we weren't there.
Yeah, I guess you let the cat out of the bag. I don't know. So, meanwhile, speaking of money laundering, A judge ruled today that he's going to keep the names redacted of the top 50 creditors to FTX. Here's Zelensky getting his big new bucket of money because the United States just announcing an additional tranche of $4.7 billion. So he's going to get some additional money just in time for the holidays from you, the taxpayers, to continue this little charade. And then, of course, money laundering. The judge ruled today that he's going to keep the names redacted of the top 50 creditors to FTX. You know, Sam Bankman-Fried's little operation that was laundering money. Then the Democratic scheme that was shoveling billions of dollars through the Ukrainian crypto exchange, or through Ukraine through the crypto exchange, and then back to the Democratic Party. Here's how it worked. Here's the good little nice diagram here in case you're wondering how that all worked. So Zero Hedge reporting this afternoon, a lawyer on behalf of a major FTX creditors made an appearance suddenly. And I want more on this story. I'm sorry. I want more on this story. He walked in front of the judge and he says he represents a significant number of customers who are likely to be on the top 50 creditor list for FTX. Well, that's interesting, as Zero Hedge reports. So a lawyer walks in and says, you don't release these names.
Yeah, I am interested too, and I would like to cross-reference those with the Epstein list that we talked about yesterday.
Exactly.
That is insane.
Insane.
And the Epstein case that we talked about yesterday was filed in 2017.
Right.
And so we're now getting it a whole 5 years later. So I do not want to wait 5 years to get this information.
No, we'll wait 75 years. We will. And then finally,
we haven't gotten it yet, so we can't really say we got it.
The list or the
list, yeah.
Yeah. And then finally, let's get you out of here on this point, on this story. U.S. senators today have been urging President Biden to start providing Ukraine with Gray Eagle unmanned aerial vehicles that could turn the tide of the war in favor of Ukraine. So more offensive weapons coming from both the UK and the United States. Forget defensive. We're going on the offensive now. That's the move. That's the weapons you'll be sending to Ukraine. Love to hear your thoughts on this story. Let us know your thoughts on this in the chat. If you subscribe to the channel, your name will pop up here on the big telly behind us. We've got more news to get to on this Tuesday. We're going to look at the nuclear investigation.
Can I just say really quick what a beautiful origin story, like Zelensky, that failing, struggling comedian to billionaire dictator in how long?
Yeah.
Like, what a story.
You know, Sean Penn should make a movie about it, and Ben Stiller should play the character. Wouldn't that be a great idea?
Wherever did you come up with that?
Just a good idea. Hey, we got more news. We're going to talk about the nuclear investigation because that angle President Putin has been fired up about, wondering when the hell are they going to investigate the continued shelling of the nuclear plant. We're going to talk about colleges still mandating the vaccine. Why are they pushing for this into the spring? Like, what in the world is going on? By the way, and we're going to hear from Dr. Fauci. You do not want to miss this. He gave his final press conference today. We're going to play you that sound because it's unbelievable. And we're going to talk about Sweden vindicated over the lockdowns. But first,